All right, ladies and gentlemen, if we can begin, we're going to get started as we have our guests that are here. All right, can everybody hear me okay? Thank you. Can you guys hear me over here okay? Okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, if we can, please, we're going to get started. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Andrew. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Greater El Paso Association of Realtors. My name is Ernesto Garcia. I'm the Governmental Affairs Communications Director here, and we're honored that you're able to join us. This is our monthly meeting of our Governmental Affairs Committee. To our committee members, we will meet after this meeting is done, after the city has done its presentation, so please stick around, and please also find Sam so you can get your sign up in, and if not, don't worry, we'll get you there. I'd like to welcome our President of GEPAR for 2023, Mr. Rick Snow, that is here as well, and our Secretary Treasurer, Shai Rodriguez as well, our Governmental Affairs Committee Chair, Alex Oreca, and our Vice Chair, Scott Kesner as well. So we're going to allow the city to do its presentation. We will come up with a way to ask questions. We also thank our friends at Media News Partner. Also say hi live. You're on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter as well. So we appreciate you coming out. A reminder, there will be another meeting tonight at 6 o'clock on Viscount Blvd at the El Paso Community Center with Representative Art Fierro's district. He's inviting you to all please come out. So if you do not get a chance to ask a question or anything such, you can definitely go there and it'll be very helpful. That being said, I'd like to welcome our city reps who will introduce themselves one by one and coming on. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Nicole Cody. This is Managing Director of Budget and Strategic Sourcing.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well today. My name is Kevin Smith. I'm with the Planning Inspections Department. I'm the Assistant Director over the Planning Department, or the Planning Section of the Department.
Good morning, everyone. Tony De La Cruz with Planning and Inspections. I oversee the Building Permits Department, and thank you for hosting this meeting.
So thank you all so much for being here today. Ernesto was telling us that unfortunately the cancellation yesterday caused some confusion, so I want to apologize in advance. Representative Anello had canceled yesterday's evening's meeting, and we did try to reach out to both media to make sure we got the word out, as well as email, but I again apologize if you did not know that the meeting had been canceled. So we do have, and we're going to cover it at the end of the presentation, but we do have that on the city website under Planning and Inspections, and we'll make sure that it's updated daily if there is any changes to the meetings. But let me go ahead and get started. So the city started to look at this probably about 2 years ago. We started to see an increase in the number of short-term rentals. We were seeing ordinances across the state, and we'll get into that a little more. Across the state, we're going into place in multiple cities and across the country. So this is a list of the different departments that we're working together, really to do the research, to see what was happening in Texas. What are we seeing from other cities? So what we'll be doing today is really a feedback session. We are here to get your voice, and that's really our number one priority. The city manager asked us to make sure we're taking into account each of the major stakeholders, and of course, you're a major stakeholder, as well as the community at large. So over the next month, as I mentioned, we're going to have meetings, multiple meetings a week, so that way we can ensure we are receiving feedback from all of you, that we are receiving the information on what do short-term rentals look like for El Paso. And that's really what they've asked us to pause and look at and make sure that any recommendations moving forward really reflect what's going to be right for El Paso. So not what's right for San Antonio or what's right for Dallas, but truly what's right for El Paso. So we'll be talking about what the other cities have in place today, as well as Kevin and Tony will be going into details on the framework. What are those questions that we have for you all regarding short-term rentals? In addition to that, we'll talk about why is it important that we have an ordinance even? And then lastly, what are the next steps? So as we look at it, the information that we are able to obtain is, of course, through third parties. There's AirDNA, there's other market minders or finders that you can look at when you Google it. And so this is just that information. We don't have more detailed information than what we're able to find on Google, just like you all. As far as the short-term rental properties, we know it fluctuates, that it's really a snapshot in time. So it depends whether you're going to be listing them on the platforms, whether the hosts decide not to list them on the platforms, whether they want to make sure that it's a rental to that period of time or not. So we do see fluctuations depending on the time of year. So this is the snapshot as of yesterday. We updated the information. And so right now, the total number is at 1839 as far as short-term rentals. Is there duplications? Possibly, because I do know that a lot of the hosts like to use different platforms. And that makes sense, right? You're going to have it on multiple platforms. So if they're just pulling based on platforms, there could be some duplication in the numbers that we see on the websites. In addition to that, they do have an estimate of the number of short-term rentals that are listed on Airbnb, which seems to be the #1 platform that's used here in El Paso, is at 74%. And so that fluctuates as well. So if you all saw the presentation or came to City Council at the beginning of January or middle of January, you'll notice that number was 77%. So it's gone down a little bit. So it does change, and I just want to make sure you know that it's just a snapshot. In addition to that is what we look at is the occupancy rate, and that, of course, fluctuates with the market, right? Depending on the number of visitors, the time of year, who's coming to El Paso, who are those, what do the guests look like, depending on the year, or depending on the time of year, I should say. So we're at about 58% as of yesterday, based on this website. So what are the changes? What are we looking at, or what does the ordinance mean? So we're looking at, of course, the review of other cities, really obtaining everyone's feedback, as I mentioned. And then what we'll be doing is, and it says final approval, but there's a lot of steps. First thing we talked about was there's a lot of steps between receiving your feedback and actually coming to council with a final recommendation. So it's not all of a sudden we're going to come back and say, okay, this is going to be the final recommendation. What council has asked us to do is come back and give them a timeline. So we're going to be taking all of the feedback that we receive from each of the meetings, and then at the end there's also a survey. So we have concrete and also other ways for people to be able to give us their feedback. So if they don't come to a meeting, we understand. You are able to still provide your feedback in the survey, and then we'll be providing that at the end of the presentation. But in addition to that, we need to be able to work with City Council representative and the city manager to really look at what is that recommendation based on the feedback that we want to move forward. What does it look like, and what would be best? And I keep repeating that, really what would be best for El Paso. And it's mainly because we've seen each city approaches it differently. Each city really does need to consider what's best for them, right? And so we're no different. So currently what we have in place right now is that under Title V, it's a bed and breakfast special permit. So you go, well, what does that mean? What that means is we don't have an ordinance that is addressing short-term rentals right now. Right now, if you own a short-term rental or you operate a short-term rental, you're falling under the city policies and regulations. You're falling under what we call a bed and breakfast permit. And it's a very, very long process. So you have to submit a request for a special permit. Then it gets vetted. They're here to correct me if I miss any steps. Then it needs to go to introduction to council, and then a final approval by council. It's considered a special permit, and it's on a case-by-case basis. So each permit would then have to go to council. And we know that's not right for short-term rentals, right? Short-term rentals, and I think it was eloquently put at the last meeting, how did short-term rentals start? How did Airbnb start? They looked at, how do you rent one room? You're in San Francisco, it's difficult to find a hotel in San Francisco. It's really expensive to find a hotel in San Francisco. But I've got this spare room, or the spare living room that has a bed. Can I rent that? How can I also augment my income? How can I make it work? And so then it developed organically, right? And now we see it across the nation, and it's an expectation, I think, for visitors to be able to have an option for short-term rental. But where are we? We're behind. We're behind the market in that sense, because we don't have that framework for them just to be able to operate. And we know, we do, because I've seen the aggregate ratings for short-term rentals for Airbnb, that 85% are a rating 4.5 or higher, is what we saw, which is great, right? That means they're great rentals. People are wanting to be able to stay in the clean rentals that are available. They're in great neighborhoods. They're attractive to guests, as they should be. So, but the question here isn't the ones that are all doing it right, and there's a lot of people doing it right. It's the handful or the few that end up not doing it right. What recourse does the guest have other than going through Airbnb? What recourse is there for the ones that have that bad experience, in the sense that they're not following normal regulations? They're not following the noise ordinance. They have, it could be just a bad experience or a bad property owner. And right now, where do they fall in the regulation of the city? They're falling under a bed and breakfast permit that they haven't even submitted for. And under the bed and breakfast permit, as per state law, they also need to collect hotel occupancy tax. It's just how we have, this is the structure. So right now, the state has an agreement when they put it in place at the state level, which I forget what year it was, 2018? 17. In 2017, they are getting their hotel occupancy tax directly from the platforms. And so you ask, well, why didn't El Paso do that? Why didn't you do that from the very beginning? We can't do that until we have an ordinance in place. And so I know there's a lot of concern, at least we've heard concern, about the burden being on the host to be able to now have to also collect the hotel occupancy tax, or the burden being on the host to now to be able to have to pay directly for the hotel occupancy tax. Well, once we have an ordinance in place, we would be able to have agreements with the platforms that they're collecting it for the hosts. And as you know, the way the hotel occupancy tax comes up when you rent a hotel room is that it's a pass-through, unfortunately, to the customer, in the sense that it's highlighted right there, and it truly is a pass-through to the customer. But it's reinvested. Why do we have hotel occupancy tax? It's a reinvestment in the community. We need to make sure that we continue to build El Paso and have a convention center, events that we want people to come to El Paso, that we want people to visit El Paso, because then that helps continue short-term rental business, right? That helps also the hotels continue hotel business. And then when we have large conventions, what happens? Then it also helps the small businesses, the people that are in downtown that are going to do shopping, or they're going to eat there. We're bringing new dollars into our economy that are to help El Paso. So that's what hotel occupancy tax, when it was first created, is intended to do, and under state law, it's required to do, to put what we call heads in beds, to make sure people are staying in El Paso, and that we reinvest that money to continue to see that grow. So I just wanted to make sure that we cover those brief points, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. Kevin?
Thanks, Nicole. If I could just add on the special permit. Has anyone gone through a special permit process before? Okay, you got one. Just so you know, it's very similar to rezoning. Okay, so it has to go before two public hearings, the city plan commission. We notify 300 feet outside the property. They're invited to this meeting to give their feedback, and the same thing happens for city council. Okay, that's under the current definition, but our goal is we want these to blend seamlessly into the neighborhoods. At the end of the day, they should act and function similar to where they're built at. Okay, whether it be a single family, a duplex, a quadruplex, an apartment, but they should act and function very similarly to those uses. So just want to give that information about a special permit under the current ordinance. But as we look at the ordinance, obviously we need a sort of a framework. So as Nicole mentioned, we look at other cities. So one of the key things is, how is this defined? And I'll get into that here in a moment for the short-term rentals. One of the things, and there's some tables I'll share shortly about density. That's one of the things that I understand is one of the concerns here, what it is. And so we're taking another look at that and say, what is appropriate for El Paso? What may be done in Waco or San Antonio or Austin may not be appropriate here in El Paso. Okay. The occupancy rate, site plan, what do those look like? At the end of the day, the biggest thing for us, and hopefully everyone here agrees, is we're interested in life safety of those individuals, the neighborhoods. And then as well as a permit. What does that look like? Is that a yearly fee? Is that maybe something we do every 3 years or every 2 years? How can we make it as least burdensome as possible to the hosts? So generally, and we looked at this, and this is what was looked at through other cities. And this is sort of, if you want to call it a best practice, but in terms of definitions, this is what was looked at to be a definition that generally most cities classify a short-term rental as, is a residential dwelling unit, apartment, condo, or accessory dwelling unit where sleeping areas are rented to overnight guests for a period of less than 30 consecutive days. Now, the part that gets really detailed, and this is where we need to look at what's appropriate for El Paso, is some of the cities go a little bit further and say, does that need to be defined a little bit more? Okay, so what I just read was the basic definition, but there are other ways to define it. Do we want to look at it, a single-family, two-family dwelling unit as one of the types, and versus apartments? That's something that we're interested, obviously, in getting the feedback back from you all and the neighborhoods. Do we want to look at it as if it's a owner-operated, owner-occupied establishment or non-owner-occupied? And this is where different cities look at it. Some of them differentiate between them. Some say, no, we're not going to differentiate between them. And that's where we need your feedback in terms of what is appropriate for El Paso. So as we look at different cities, and there's another slide, which will be, I'll go over shortly. They run the spectrum of what they require or not require. San Antonio is one that looks at whether it's owner-occupied or not owner-occupied. They have density limitations for percentage. Austin looks at very similar, but they also look at, they have, if you want to call it, 3 different types. They have owner-occupied single-family or duplex, a non-owner-occupied single-family or duplex, or a multifamily dwelling unit. So what's appropriate? And then the same is with the cities in terms of what they charge for a permit. What does that look like? What's appropriate for El Paso, as well as violations? Okay. So this slide here generally covers a brief overview of what they require and not require. The city of Grapevine prohibits short-term rentals in their city. That may work for Grapevine, okay, but we're El Paso. Okay. Some other cities say, you know what, we'll allow you, but with some restrictions. Sometimes it's density, sometimes it's not allowing them in, say, single-family residences. So Austin, San Antonio, and Waco are a few of those cities. Some just say, you know what, you're allowed basically in residential zoning districts or where you can have one, even apartments, but no other restrictions were noted, such as Fort Worth, Albuquerque, and Arlington. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make is they go from one extreme to the other. El Paso is somewhere in there. And that's these efforts that we'll take over the next few weeks with yourselves and other members of the community to help us as we look at presenting an item to City Council in the future. At the end of the day, we need to find a balance between these short-term rentals and the neighborhood. And that's the key that we're trying to find is that what works well for the hosts, but what works also for the neighborhoods. Again, we want this to be a partnership between all parties. Okay, and that's our goal. So density limitations. When this was presented, I know there was a lot of public comment about that. As I mentioned, the density limitations, they run a spectrum. Some have no density limitations. Waco had 500 feet. San Antonio, like I said, had a percentage of a block. What's appropriate? Okay. One of the items that we are looking at is a potential grandfathering allowance. Where say after if a density limitation is imposed and approved by the City of El Council, by the City Council, is potentially having a time period, a grace period, like a 6-month period where we're not going to look at the density limitations. You can come in, register, and then you can be pretty, as close as you want right next door without a worry about limitations. But those are items that we're looking at, and we look to get your feedback. Next, I will pass it over to Tony to go over some of the permitting items that we're looking at.
Good morning, everyone. Again, thank you for having us. So I'm going to be going over some of the information that we've seen in other cities, how they're handling permitting, whether they're handling permitting or not. So as far as what we've been looking at, if a permit were to be required, that would be a permit that would be applied through with the City of El Paso. Again, this is something that we've been looking at through other cities, how they're dealing with it. Some have permitting regulations, some do not. Some of the cities are basically saying, all you need to do is register through a platform, and then at that point, once the ordinance is established, collects the hotel occupancy tax, and that's it. We're done with that portion. There is no inspection by the city on the residents. Basically, we're going, trusting the host to maintain the residents under the standards of the short-term rental, and largely Airbnb is self-regulating already. They have established rules to what can you call a bedroom, what can you not call a bedroom, where do you need egress requirements, where do you not. So a lot of that we understand is already there. So, but what we really want to find out from you guys is this something that's really needed for the city to require a permit on here. So at this point, what we've looked at is really how do we develop that permit? So we would have to create a new section within Title V of the Municipal Code.
Can you hear us? Okay.
Hello. All right. Sorry, I apologize for that. So, as I mentioned, we're looking at if we apply a permitting requirement, what is going to be applicable? So realistically, if we were to apply a permitting requirement under Title V, new section of the code that would have to be adopted, that would establish what would be needed to be submitted. And right now, what we're looking at submittal requirements, of course, would be a basic application. Everything would be done on an online a platform. We would try to simplify it to where it can be done from basically any of the mobile devices, computers, to where you never have to come down to the office. Okay. Payments would be taken over the mobile devices or through computer or even in person if need be. But at this point, what we'd be looking at, and this is something that came up during the meeting with City Council, is the requirement for an architect or an engineer to design a basic plan. That is indeed not the fact. Under state law, a house, even a brand new house, is not required to be designed by an architect, no matter the size of the house. Okay. So I'm showing a basic example of other municipalities and something that would be acceptable. It's nothing that we're going to say, get a drafter. The host could be able to basically draw this on grid paper and let us know this is how the house is looking like. At that point, if permitting regulations were established, we'd potentially look at should we limit the occupant load in that structure? That is something that's already in the books as far as the City of El Paso is concerned. We have a provision under the Property Maintenance Code that prevents overcrowding of structures. Okay, so with that, we're not saying we're going to regulate you as hotels that require one person per 200 square feet. We simply want to ensure that the establishment is not overcrowded. This goes in line with some of the complaints that you've seen, not so much in our city, but we've seen it throughout other cities where properties are rented for parties. And I know that Airbnb already tells people you can't do this, but once it's rented, a lot of the renters don't necessarily abide by that, okay? So that would be some of the things that we're looking at. So as I mentioned, we're looking at classifying the type, whether we were to adopt type 1, type 2, type 3 that Kevin covered before. Basic floor plan as shown on the screen. The life safety requirements, really use a bedroom with proper egress. The last thing any of us would want is having a basement that doesn't have the proper egress. For one reason or another, an emergency happens and your tenant cannot evacuate quickly. Okay. The tenant notification, that's something that I've stayed at many Airbnbs. Some of them great, some of them not so great. But it's something that the hosts are already doing. They're putting it in their binder, letting people know, okay, this is when the trash is picked up. These are regulations of the city. So that's already something that's already being provided. One thing that we discussed was potentially us drafting something that would be simply filling in the blanks. That way it lessens the abnormal submittals and just keeps everything consistent and for our review if we were to go that route. And finally, it would be renewal. What do we want to see as renewal rates? Do we want 1 year renewal, 3 year renewal? That's something that's up for discussion, and you'll see throughout within our survey. So tenant indoor notification. Again, this is something that the hosts are already doing. They're basically, when you log in, you say, how many occupants are you going to have? It pulls up the listings that are applicable to the occupants that you're proposing. So that's already shown within the overall binder. It tells you where you can't park. We're looking at the quiet hours. Basically, the property cleanliness requirements. I know when I stayed up in Durango this past winter, they said this is when the trash is picked up. This is where you put it. So all the basic stuff that we're already doing is basically the information that we'd request if a permit were to be required. Nicole?
Thank you, Tony. So Tony and Kevin have really covered what the meat of the ordinance is. Those are the major portions of the framework or the pillars that the ordinance itself would be defined. And so we look at, well, why would a short-term rental ordinance even be important? And really because it makes a clear definition on what a short-term rental is. It does allow us to have a permit to be able to help in situations. Right now, we do not know where the short-term rentals are. So we get asked, well, is there more crime in short-term rentals, or why would we're concerned about safety? Well, to be quite honest, we don't know where the short-term rentals are. And so this is part of that fact finding. We don't know if the majority of our short-term rentals in El Paso are the property owner lives on the premises or they don't. And so a lot of those considerations, I think, is what we're looking for in the feedback and in the survey that we're going to provide. So you can provide that information. So we understand what it looks like currently, what climate we have in El Paso, and then also to ensure that the guests is not only protecting the host, but also the guests as well, and the neighbors. So that if there's a short-term rental permit, we know that you have everything that Kevin and Tony just talked about are in place, that you are doing what you need to do and going to be a good neighbor in our community. And that's really what it's about, is ensuring that everyone's able to be held to the same standard and is a good neighbor in our community. So what we didn't talk about regarding the permit fee is, I apologize, let me take a step back, is that the city manager heard overwhelmingly that an annual renewal may or may not work, right? And also the amount, I think, was discussed as being, it was in line with what we were seeing on the comparison cities. As you saw, I think some had, it was every 3 years. So what we're doing is really looking at revamping that. So at this point, if we have a permit, it can be anywhere from $100 to $300 or even less, but we are looking at that being a renewal every other year or every 3 years, depending on what we really feel is fair. We want it to be a fair and reasonable, and in the sense that we also want it to be easy. It needs to be easy to be able to register for these permits. We understand that the entire industry is based on you can rent it from your phone. They actually, some of the renters host at the end of the council meeting were so awesome. They came over to me and said, look, Nicole, you can see I've got 4 platforms. I can see which property is being rented by which platform. Everything is on my phone. Why are you going to make it complex for us? Why are you going to make another burden? And so that we do not. That is not the intent of this, and I want to make sure that everyone understands that is definitely not the intent. We do not want a process that's going to be burdensome and something that right now is so easy to be able to do. So we don't want to create a process or a system that now limits a business opportunity for someone. That is not the intent of this, and I think it's really important because I've heard a lot of different information, a lot of different interpretations out there on what this is going to look like. And I want you to know that we're here. We're telling you, the city manager has made sure that we communicate this, that it's not going to be this burden, and it can't be because it's just not going to work, right? It won't work, period. And so we realize that. And so we want to make it easy. It's online. You should be able to do it from your phone, quick and easy, simple payment, know where you're at, get a reminder if it needs to be renewed. That's it. And really, 95%, 98% of you probably will never hear from us about any issues because we know there's a higher standard for short-term rentals. As a short-term renter, Tony brought it up as a guest. I've been a guest. We have high expectations, don't we? And those expectations are part of the requirements of the business in order to ensure that you're getting good ratings to continue with business. So we're really looking at what is that 2 to 5% that we need to look at that isn't holding the same standard. And so thank you all really for your time, and we're going to open it up to questions. But please know that we've got continued public outreach. Just real quick, public outreach summaries is that we continue on our website. Again, it's under the City of El Paso's Planning and Inspections is the name of the department, and there's a banner at the top that says short-term rentals. So click on it, and it'll have the list of information as well as the calendar that will be coming up for council. We will continue to have social media and press releases as well as additional presentations on this. And then here we're going to kind of go over the next presentations that we have over the course of the month. And again, they're both hybrid and in person because we want to make sure we give enough opportunities for your feedback and for your questions. And I'm kind of flipping through them quickly, but yeah, of course. Yes, ma'am. Will do. I apologize again, sir. Unfortunately, Representative. Yeah, no, and that's why I wanted to start the meeting with that apology, because the minute Ernesto told us, I apologize, we weren't aware. If the representative is the one that had canceled it, it was her meeting. And again, please check the website. We'll make sure that we have the information available and update every day on the website. Oh, absolutely. So, absolutely. So, sir, and not in a defense in any way, but they are at each of their community meetings within their district. They will be present at those meetings, of course, because they are their community meetings. The larger stakeholder meetings that we're holding with, like this association, the El Paso Chamber, El Paso Hispanic Chamber, I believe. Those are wider stakeholder meetings, and they're invited to join us, but I understand they really are going to be at their community meetings. Yeah.
So I'm going to open up the questions first for our committee members, and then what I would like is if anybody would like to make a question, please come and line it up right here, and I will get to that part and make sure that we Right now, I'm going to first ask questions, comments.
Move on.
I wanted to address this question. We invited the city planners here for our affairs, and then it opened up to everybody. It wasn't supposed to be a true community meeting with the representatives. We want to talk to people who build the ordinance, and that's why it kind of developed like it developed. But we have been, at government affairs, we have been in contact with city reps. And I totally agree. They're the ones that like face music. But we wanted time to kind of talk to people that planned it to kind of see where they were at first. That's the way this format kind of worked.
Committee members go last.
Anybody else want to start?
Just a couple of quick things. One, you keep talking about safety, and there's no more terrifying words than from the government on here health. But I guess my issue is the noise ordinance issue we have. How many residential property?
Yes, sir. It was based on, that's why I gave all the disclosures. Yes, sir, because we can't verify those numbers. Yes, sir. That's good. Absolutely. I, yes, sir.